May the 4th be with you. It's my nerd world, and welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice, and what a fantastic Monday so far, right? That Clone Wars, right? Now, I waited to do the show today, and I'm glad that I did, because some pretty stellar, amazing news got confirmed about somebody who I really wanted to see do a Star Wars movie is going to be doing a Star Wars movie, directing a Star Wars movie, and writing a Star Wars movie. Plus, I want to talk about these last 2 episodes of the Clone Wars, Shattered and Victory and Death. Just so great, so emotional. So hopefully today's show can bring a little bit of joy into your life in this coronavirus world that we're all living in right now. It is a Star Wars podcast, and the show is brought to you by the EMBARK trilogy. Book 1, Book 2, Treasure in Darkness, and Book 3 just released, The Vanishing War. More details about that a little bit later on in the show. But for now, let's not waste any more time and get right to it.
No, my father didn't fight in the wars. He was a navigator on a spice freighter.
That's what your uncle told you. He didn't hold with your father's ideals, thought he should have stayed here and not gotten involved.
You fought in the Clone Wars?
Yes. I was once a Jedi Knight, the same as your father.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one. There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
9 Nerd Road.
Just let it in.
So glad you're with the show, this special edition of a Star Wars podcast here on My Nerd World, and I am your host, Jon Justice, on this May the 4th. May the 4th be with you, and I love the fact that this has become such a special day. And, you know, this day only comes once a year, and I love the fact that the play on words has now grown into this amazing day of Star Wars celebration, and we can, once again have an opportunity to forget about what we're all dealing with right now and just talk about how wonderful Star Wars is, how inspirational Star Wars is, how much joy Star Wars brings into our lives. And I'm in the middle of the book launch for the conclusion to the opening trilogy in my EMBARK series, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. We got the first reviews in, and I'll talk about that at the end of the show after listener feedback. But I only bring it up because it's because of Star Wars that inspired me to do something that I never ever thought I would ever do, and that is write a book, let alone create a trilogy. And I'm incredibly I'm overjoyed with the response that I've received so far, and this was all because of my inspiration of George Lucas and this world that he created all those years ago, right? It really is incredible, and I'm so glad that we have the opportunity to continue to consume Star Wars content. And it's so much fun for me to be able to pop on for another special episode and talk a little Star Wars, especially when we actually have some pretty big news to talk about on the show this week. So before we get to that, I just want to talk a little bit about Clone Wars and the finale of the entire series, but more specifically this movie, as Sam Witwer has been calling it. He's the voice of many voices in Star Wars, but of course the voice of Darth Maul in the Clone Wars series. And Sam Witwer has been calling this a movie, and it really is a movie. You know, it's just about 2 hours long when you combine all 4 episodes together, and I'm just praying that Disney offers this in a movie fashion or does what I have mentioned in previous shows and takes these last 4 episodes and combines them with within Revenge of the Sith for sort of a supercut. I'm going to be watching Revenge of the Sith as soon as I wrap up the show today. That's going to be my Star Wars pick for the day. At least one of them is going to be. I think I might watch a Mandalorian too, and I'll get to that in just a second. But these last 4 episodes have just been nothing short of incredible. They really have. And for a character that I already loved, I didn't think I could care for this character any more than I already did, and now I do in Ahsoka Tano. And it's such an amazing story when you consider when the Clone Wars launched. And Sam was on another podcast. I think it was Docking Bay 94. He was on another podcast, and he talked about how kind of unfair it was when they put out those first few episodes of the Clone Wars and made it a theatrical release in the original Clone Wars movie, which gave us the introduction of Ahsoka Tano. You go back and watch that original movie, and I enjoyed that original movie, don't misunderstand. But it really is sort of rough in comparison. Now I actually want to watch it because of Ahsoka, because you get the introduction to Ahsoka, right? But, Sam made a really good point in that, this was designed for TV, and it didn't necessarily translate to the big screen when it was up against so many other feature animated films, especially like the Blue Sky Productions and DreamWorks and Pixar. And when Ahsoka was first introduced, the fans hated her. Snips and Sny Guy and Sky Guy, they didn't get it. I was indifferent at the time. I really liked the idea of Ahsoka, but she didn't. I was kind of indifferent to her in that opening movie. But once the Clone Wars sort of hit its stride, you suddenly realize that this was a character that was something special. And she continued, I think we all kind of grew with her through the series. And Dave Filoni did such an amazing job of cultivating this character to the point now where this, even though timeline-wise this kind of takes place in the middle of her history if you track her timeline when it comes to Rebels, right? But certainly the culmination of her story within the Clone Wars. What they were able to accomplish in bringing this character to fruition in these last 4 episodes was just amazing. And just an incredible cinematic animation that they brought forward in all 4 episodes. But, the emotional depth and weight to Shattered and Victory and Death was just amazing. And they stuck the landing so hard. They really just did an absolutely incredible job. And again, a little bit of spoilers here, so if you haven't watched it yet, maybe pause for a minute and then come back to it. But the final shots of Rex with Ahsoka and the graves of the clone troopers and the way that they handled getting off of that Venator-class Star Destroyer, leading into obviously we advance in the timeline a bit with the appearance of Darth Vader and him walking up and discovering the lightsaber and the symbolism there of him lighting it, sort of symbolizing his eventual return to the light side. The way they used the same animation model for Vader that they did for Anakin, the way the armor on Vader, now you kind of see the correlation between the outfit that Anakin was wearing in the Clone Wars, and you look closely in that final shot with the down sort of camera shot on Vader's helmet, and you can see through to his eyes, which I thought was amazing, especially when you consider it was a movie mistake in A New Hope at the end of the film, when you can actually see into the mask and see the actor behind there. I like the fact, and they played with this before in Rebels, but they really accentuated it in this final episode of the Clone Wars. And I like the fact that it adds a little bit of a positive. It's not really a retcon, but it adds some validity to what we see in A New Hope, and being able to see through the red lenses. It's actually one of my chief complaints, not chief complaints, but a complaint I have of Rogue One was that if you look at the Vader helmet in A New Hope from the original film, it doesn't match the Vader helmet in Rogue One. The Vader helmet in Rogue One is still too smooth. It doesn't have the coarseness that. Now, granted, you don't get to see it quite as up close. Well, no, actually, you do. When you see Vader on on Mustafar, that's right. I'm got to correct myself. You do get a good shot of the helmet, unless he's wearing a different one that's a little bit more rugged. At the end of the film, you don't quite see it as up close, except for that final shot after the Tantive 4 takes off from the hangar. But that was one of the things that I wanted to see. If you look closely, especially in HD, of Vader's helmet in A New Hope, it has a very rough, sort of handcrafted texture to it that's missing from what you see in Rogue One. A minor complaint. It doesn't take anything out of it. It's just, if we're as the Rewatchables podcast, which is a fantastic podcast, by the way, as the Rewatchable podcast often says with Bill Simmons, if we're picking nits. If we're nitpicking, if we're picking nits, then that's a bit of a nitpick. Be that as it may, that final episode of Victory and Death really brought me to tears. And I want to mention one more thing, and then we're going to move on to some of the big news and do a little listener feedback. Got a couple of emails from over the week of Friday's show, but I realized something watching these last 4 episodes, because they are very cinematic in the way that they were shot. And, I mentioned in the previous few episodes how of a Star Wars podcast, how the animation shifts a little bit from the first 8 episodes to the last 4, because those first 8 were kind of already in the bank, and they do change it up a little bit in these last 4 episodes. And Ahsoka certainly has a slightly older look to herself. But the style of the animation and the action in that cinematic format works fantastic in the animated form. I would say that when it comes to the films have done a really, really good job of, especially in Revenge of the Sith, of that acrobatic Jedi and sort of mimicking those same really over the top moves that you can absolutely get away with in animation that aren't quite as easy to get away with in live action. I want to throw out a hat tip to the sequels and honestly to the Rise of Skywalker, because I really feel like that final duel, not just the final duel, but the final duel on Kef Burr between Kylo Ren and Rey on the ruins of the Death Star 2, I really think that was the best and most well choreographed equivalent to what we get in terms of the Jedi and how powerful they are when you compare it to the animation. And even the final battle on Exegol, not just with Ben Solo against the Knights of Ren, but also Rey. I haven't talked about this before, but that moment right before Ben Solo shows up, before they go to face Palpatine, the two of them, and before he realizes they're a dyad, when Rey takes out those Red Emperor guards, that is a fantastic sequence and is incredibly well choreographed. And that's what I was reminded of watching these final episodes of the Clone Wars, was how animation can really do a good job of the over the top moves that the limitations of live action, kind of keep you from doing, but that the sequels, in my opinion, really, especially The Rise of Skywalker, really did that the best. There's some fantastic moments in Revenge of the Sith and the prequels as well. Do not misunderstand. But I do think that what they started with the prequels in some of those battles and the choreography in the prequels, they really perfected and nailed in The Rise of Skywalker. A lot of people point to the Phantom Menace, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Qui-Gon Jinn, Darth Maul duel as one of their favorites, and it is one of mine too. My only, again, if we're nitpicking, my only complaint on that particular fight, that lightsaber fight on Theed, is it's a little too choreographed. There's a couple of moves by Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi that you can see it is very much a dance. And I feel like in The Rise of Skywalker, in my opinion, they really made it look raw and emotional and realistic, even the flipping over the waves and the jumping over the waves. It's just absolutely fantastic. As always, though, I'd like to hear from you as we get in. You're going to kind of get 3 episodes in short order. There'll be another episode coming up on Friday. But please email me, TalkShowNerd at gmail.com, or leave a comment on YouTube if you're watching there. I'd love to know your thoughts, especially on the season finale of the Clone Wars, and I'd like to know how it affected you. I mean, what a great way to start off my May the 4th, my Star Wars Day. Just absolutely fantastic.
This is not going to go the way you think.
So I intentionally waited just a little bit longer to do the show today. I planned on doing it earlier because I wanted to get all my stuff for the day done. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to hold off just a little bit. And I'm probably going to regret even doing that because I wonder if there will be more announcements today, considering it is Star Wars Day. But I'm glad that I waited because right before I sat down to record the show, StarWars.com put out some official information about a new Star Wars film. It's something that was rumored and speculated, and now we have confirmation. Academy Award winner Taika Waititi to direct and co-write new Star Wars feature film for theatrical release. Oscar nominee Christy Wilson Carnes to co-write screenplay with Waititi. Emmy-nominated Leslie Headland to write, produce, and serve as showrunner for a new Untitled Star Wars series for Disney+. Okay, so these were all things that were reported but rumored. Now they are confirmed. Here's the story from StarWars.com. Short on details, but here it is nonetheless. Academy Award winner Taika Waititi, who recently won Best Adapted Screenplay for Jojo Rabbit and directed the widely acclaimed first season finale episode of The Mandalorian on Disney+, will direct and co-write a new Star Wars feature film for theatrical release. Joining Waititi on the screenplay will be Academy Award nominee Christy Wilson Carnes, who did Last Night in Soho and 1917, which is a fantastic film. She received a BAFTA award for Outstanding British Film of the Year on the 3-time Oscar-winning film 1917. In addition, the Emmy-nominated writer Leslie Headland, Russian Doll and Bachelorette, is currently developing a new Untitled Star Wars series for Disney+. Headland will write, executive produce, and serve as showrunner for the series, which adds to a growing list of Star Wars stories for Disney's streaming platform, including The Mandalorian, now in post-production on Season 2, and 2 other previously announced series, one on Cassian Andor's life prior to the events of Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and the other following the adventures of Obi-Wan Kenobi between Star Wars Revenge of the Sith and Star Wars A New Hope. Release dates for both Waititi's and Headland's project have not yet been announced. So this was rumored all along. I mean, this was rumored a while ago when we did a show on it. I don't want to completely go over the ground that I went over before, but I will say that this just has me really excited. In terms of when it will get released, that's obviously going to be a big question. With this world that we live in right now and production on everything still shut down, that's one issue. However, it looks like if word is true that we could have a vaccine by the end of the year and some better treatments, and the process of opening the economy back up has already begun in a lot of states, not fast enough here in Minnesota, in my opinion, be that as it may. Hopefully none of what is currently in pre-production will get delayed too much. When it comes to Taika Waititi and his film, though, I don't think it's going to have any impact at all. By the time that he gets through doing 2 more, he's got 1 film in post-production, and then he's also doing Thor: Love and Thunder. And that, I believe, has a 2022 release date. So most of the speculation right now is that this will not be the still slated 2022 film, but perhaps one in 2023 or 2024 for Taika Waititi. I'm really excited for it. I love his cinematic style, for one. So let's talk about that. That final episode of The Mandalorian is, from an action standpoint and a visual standpoint, my favorite. Thor Ragnarok is one of my favorite Marvel films. That movie is incredibly funny. I love Taika Waititi's sense of humor, and he has got an incredible eye for action. He is very inspirational to me as well. I'm writing, and I'm almost complete with a 4th book It'll be a spin-off story, so it won't be number 4 in my EMBARK series. It will be a separate side EMBARK adventure. But writing that book in first person, I was very much inspired by the type of humor and the writing of Taika Waititi. Jojo Rabbit was really funny. Like I said, I love Thor Ragnarok. I love the combination of good drama with really good, witty comedy on top of really good choreographed action. And I found it very inspirational as I was writing this particular spin-off story. And there's little things that Taika Waititi does in terms of his camera angles and shots that they're really beautiful to look at. The opening shot, and this is really minor, but just for me from a visual standpoint, I write my novels to be movies. I write my books, my stories for people that love movies because that's how I envision it in my head. And the shot of IG-11 with the child as it comes across screaming on the speeder at an angle at the beginning of that episode, that final episode of The Mandalorian, and then we get the Mandalorian logo. It's masterful. Just such a great shot into the intro of that show. And the action sequences in Thor Ragnarok are just absolutely spectacular. So I don't know anything about Russian Doll or Bachelorette of Leslie Headland. I'm excited about it being a female-centric Star Wars show. I'm not going to lie. I like those strong female characters in these. I think that's a good thing. Star Wars is always going to have its fair mix of male and female. And I have no problem at all with the female-led Star Wars franchises. I mean, in the animated form, Ahsoka is my favorite character, but Rey in The Rise of Skywalker and Daisy Ridley's portrayal of her is one of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars and all of any of the Star Wars films. I just absolutely love the way her character is written, portrayed, and the way Daisy handles her in the Rise of Skywalker. TalkShowNerd @gmail.com. Leave a comment on YouTube. What do you think? What are your thoughts on all this news? Won't be getting the movies anytime soon, but it's great to know that they're there. It's great to know they're coming. And it's great to know that these live-action TV shows are coming. We don't know what cinema's going to look like here in the next year or so, but I pray by the time these new Star Wars films are done that this coronavirus is something that we look back on. Remember that 2020 year? Glad that year's over, and we're all heading to the theater again. The thought of that makes me tear up just a little tiny bit because I want, I think we all want our lives back. TalkShowNerd @gmail.com and leave a comment on YouTube. All right, let's do a little listener feedback. Not a lot, but we do have some.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Friend of the show, Brian Martin, always asks the most direct questions, and I'm keen to answer. How okay are you with Chewbacca's death and C-3PO's mind wipe both being fake outs? They didn't bother me at all. Now I say that, but I need to be upfront. I knew about those going into the movie because I had read the leaks, so I probably would have had a stronger opinion about both of those circumstances had I not known going into the film that both of those things are happened. But on 25 rewatches of the Rise of Skywalker, they don't bother me at all. I find them to be perfectly fine plot points, moving the story forward. I do want to add something though. I was having a conversation with my wife Melinda about this, and I don't know how we got on it. We were talking about something Star Wars related, and we were talking about the fandom, and I mentioned how, A New Hope. Oh, we were talking about my story writing and plot points that kind of get pushed off to the side and people don't, or certain things that just don't add up or make sense. Okay, something like that. And I made a comment to her that when A New Hope came out, right, you had this perfect adventure, and this beginning to end, this hero's journey, with a very clear objective. It's what inspired me to write the first story and EMBARK, and why I wanted that to have a very clear objective as well in that story, especially when we get to the end. And I said, what's funny about it is that by the time you get to The Empire Strikes Back, you could really start to tear down A New Hope. And what I mean by that is Empire Strikes Back opens up with the Star Destroyer sending out, probes to search for the rebellion, right? The next time we see the Empire in The Empire Strikes Back, we've got Vader's ship, Vader's massive Star Destroyer, along with, half a dozen smaller Star Destroyers, a bunch of, basically an armada, right? Well, one can easily go and ask, why in the heck wasn't that armada around the Death Star to help defend it when they went to go and blow up Yavin, right? We didn't care back then, though. I don't care now. My point is, if the internet were around when A New Hope came out, or if A New Hope came out now and the trilogy came out now, and I've made this comment before, but I just felt like making it again, you could nitpick and tear apart the original trilogy with a whole bunch of things that just simply don't make sense. See, this is why things like the Holdo maneuver in The Last Jedi don't bother me, right? Because really, if you're going to go down that road, then you're being intellectually dishonest when it comes to Star Wars and all of the plot holes that are all over the place in all the films, including the original trilogy. It just doesn't really line up or make a whole heck of a lot of sense that you wouldn't have backup for the Death Star going to destroy this planet when you got a whole fleet out there somewhere else, And again, I'm not nitpicking. I don't care. I'm just saying that this is why. And to Brian Martin's, and this isn't anything against the person that Brian that emailed, I'm just saying when it comes to all these things that get nitpicked to the nth degree in the sequel trilogy and even in the prequel trilogy, it's like, no, you know what? That's fine, but I hope you're doing the same thing and being intellectually honest with yourself about all the things that don't necessarily add up in the original trilogy that we don't care about. Because we loved them as a kid and we didn't have the internet back then to have a bunch of people reinforce ideas or plant ideas into our head that weren't there before and suddenly try to make sense of Star Wars, for crying out loud, right? Okay, so yeah, I don't care about C-3PO's mind wipe or Chewbacca's death being fake outs. I'm just wholly entertained by these films. Brennan Marr writes this. It's so nice to find a fellow positive Star Wars podcaster. Love the show. Thank you very much, Brennan. I appreciate that. I believe that the title Rise of Skywalker refers to more than one character. I think it refers to the rise of legacies of Anakin, Leia, Luke, and Shmi. Let's not forget her. The redemption and subsequent rise of Ben Solo, and the rise of Rey as the savior of the galaxy. I also think it's also the rise of Han Solo in some fashion. I watched, shocking, I watched The Rise of Skywalker on Saturday afternoon, and I was thinking about actually this very thing, and I agree with Brennan. The Rise of Skywalker title can relate to a number of different things, and this is including at the end of the film. The one that really stuck out to me was after Ben Solo gets yeeted into the pit and then climbs back up. Palpatine even says, the end of Skywalker, as I fall, so will the last Skywalker, and he tosses him in. And then Ben Solo, of course, comes back out of the pit. So, Brendan, I would agree, and thank you for the positive comments. I appreciate it. The Lowdown Show says this. This is Edwin. Every time my family watches The Rise of Skywalker, my wife never likes the kiss at the end. She's a casual fan. I love I've said it many times in the show. I'll continue to say it. I love that moment. That look of joy on Rey's face, and, as a dude, to have a woman look at you like that and then kiss you, just, oh my gosh, whatever. I'm a hopeless romantic, though. Last one. Olga writes this. Really enjoyed that Star Wars show, and listening to the Master and Apprentice talking about the Clone Wars was fantastic and enjoyable. And she's talking about the most recent Star Wars show from this past week. It was really, really good. So, look, that's it for the show today. Like I said, it was going to be a shorter one for May the 4th. We'll have another full show coming up on Friday. I'm sure there'll be a lot to talk about, and hopefully your emails as well. Before I let you go, though, I do want to take just a moment and remind you that the trilogy for EMBARK is now available at mynerdworld.net. So I have a couple of the first reviews, if you'll indulge me, but first I want to read you the description from the book blurb of the book itself. Embark the Vanishing War. The war for peace is about to begin. Having faced a stunning defeat at the hands of the evil Supreme Commander Sin Argum, longtime friends and leaders of a brave resistance, Taft, Katha, Ven, and Jabet must prepare for the inevitable attack on their homeworld. While the ruthless and powerful D-Corp amasses the largest military fleet in human history, a lone pilot arrives with vital information for the Raider Alliance on Zima. Escaping Earth and starting a new life in a far-off solar system was just the beginning. Conflict is on the horizon, and only Taft, Katha, and their ragtag group of freedom fighters, armed with the truth, can stop it. Embark the Vanishing War marks the epic conclusion to the opening trilogy in the Embark series by Jon Justice Lo Giudice. Here are the first few reviews. Another winner, writes Mike. I've been anxiously awaiting for Book 3 of the Embark series to come out, and it did not disappoint. It had been a while since I finished Book 2, but it did not take long for me to be back in this futuristic world with the characters and villains that I'd come to know from the first 2 Embark books. So much chemistry mixed with fast-paced battle scenes. The author makes this world come alive. I found it almost impossible to put down. Ben writes this. Just finished Book 3, the conclusion of the Embark trilogy. The book never slowed down, kept me engaged throughout while recreating the action sequences and dogfights in my imagination. Jon Justice did a great job wrapping up the story, and I'm already looking forward to Book 4. I should also say this about the Embark trilogy, Jon Justice and his growth as an author. The articulation in Book 3 compared to 1 keeps the story moving and the reader engaged while not being loquacious. I hope he continues to find success as an author. If you go to mynerdworld.net, you can get your copy of the books in ebook, paperback, or audiobook for books 1 and 2. For May the 4th and Star Wars Day, I have discounted the first 2 books in ebook. You can pick up Embark Book 1 for just 99 cents in ebook and Treasure in Darkness for $2.99. The Vanishing War is available in ebook for $4.99. Please don't delay in purchasing your book. I'm in the middle of my launch window right now, and I'm trying to reach the highest rankings on Amazon that I possibly can. And with your help, I can hit number 1 in the teen and young adult space opera category. But that's only if you head on over to mynerdworld.net and Amazon.com right now and pick up your copies of the Embark trilogy and specifically Embark the Vanishing War. Get it for you or a friend. If you have friends that are sci-fi fans and like Star Wars and are looking for a new trilogy to read, this is a fantastic opportunity to surprise a friend in the middle of quarantine and something for them to read at home, and you can gift it right there on the Amazon website. And again, it's your way to support my Nerd World and the podcast that I do on the show, and thank you so much for everybody who has purchased the books already. Please go and leave a positive review for all 3 of the books if you haven't already, depending on what you've read. I need as many reviews as I can get. That really helps me out as well. Again, mynerdworld.net, and go and pick yourself up a copy of the books, and I really do appreciate it. All right, that's it. I hope you have a fantastic Star Wars Day, or whenever you're listening to this. Revenge of the 5th is good as well. I'll probably keep that discounted price through Tuesday, but they'll only be available in ebook for book 1 and 2 at this discounted price for just a couple days. So don't delay and head on over to mynerdworld.net and pick up your copy. All right. May the 4th be with you, and I'll talk to you again coming up later this weekend. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.